President Rodrigo Duterte approves 3.757 trillion peso proposed national budget for the year 2019. The Land Transportation Franchising and Regulatory Board assures launching a fuel voucher distribution this July. And Vice President Leni Robredo supports bid to suspend and revisit train law provisions. Good evening. President Rodrigo Duterte approves the 2019 proposed cash-based national budget amounting to 3.757 trillion pesos. However, there are no details yet if this already includes the budget for the plebiscite on the shift to federal government next year. Rosalie Cos tells us why.
President Rodrigo Duterte will submit to Congress on July 23 the proposed 2019 cash-based national budget to coincide with his third State of the Nation address. According to Presidential Spokesperson Secretary Harry Roque, the President approved the proposed budget during the 27th Cabinet meeting in Malacanang on Monday night. The proposed budget for next year is 3.757 trillion pesos, which is 10 billion pesos lower than this year's budget. Under cash-based appropriations, agencies will be forced to spend their respective budgets within the fiscal year or else would lose them. In the past, the obligations-based budget allowed distributions within a 2-year period. Agencies will also no longer submit projects to the Department of Budget and Management that are not yet implementation ready. The biggest proposed allocations are for personal services, maintenance expenditures, capital outlays, and allotments for local government units. Meanwhile, there are no details yet if the proposal already includes the fund for the plebiscite on the shift to federal government next year. However, the government is confident that the Congress can allot supplemental budget for this if necessary.
Ang inaasahan nga po natin ay kasabayan ng 2019 elections, no? So kasama na po sa budget ng 2019 elections siguro po yun, kung maisasabay sa 2019 elections.
Rosalie Cos, UNTV News and Rescue, Malacanang.
President Rodrigo Duterte certifies as urgent the bill seeking to provide Filipinos with universal access to healthcare. This was confirmed by presidential spokesperson Harry Roque during yesterday's almost 10-hour meeting of the chief executive with his cabinet members. The move aims to hasten the process of ratifying the bill, which was already approved in the House of Representatives, but the counterpart legislation in Senate remains pending. Under the House version, each Filipino will be under the National Health Security Program and the PhilHealth membership process will be simplified.
Hybrid po itong ating universal healthcare. Nandiyan pa rin po yung papalit sa PhilHealth na ang pangalan ay Philippine Health Security Corporation na siyang magbibigay ng medical insurance, pero ang pagkakaiba po nito ay yung pagkilala na hindi po sapat ang medical insurance para mabigyan ng libreng paggamutan lahat at gagasusan po natin ng pera galing sa kaban ng bayan.
The Land Transportation Franchising and Regulatory Board assures its fuel subsidy program for legitimate public jeepney drivers will push through this month following delays in the distribution of fuel vouchers. Jo Anano tells us why.
The Land Transportation Franchising and Regulatory Board is fast-tracking the launching of the Pantawid Pasada or Fuel Subsidy Program that will benefit around 179,000 public utility jeepney drivers and operators nationwide. LTFRB Chairman Martin Delgres says they are now finalizing the guidelines for the distribution of fuel vouchers after meeting with the stakeholders. Under the program, a legitimate jeepney driver or operator will receive 800 pesos monthly subsidy from the government in the form of fuel vouchers. LTFRB earlier postponed the July 5 target date of distribution, asking for more time to address some issues. This include ensuring the reliability of the database on franchise holders and the placement of the vehicle's plate number in the fuel voucher card.
Para lang masiguro ng gasolinahan na yung binigyan ng card is identified yung sasakyan, yung sa card mismo nakalagay na rin yung plate number ng sasakyan. Kasama na rin yung pangalan ng operator, pati na rin po yung case number if I'm not mistaken. Ibig sabihin may prangkisa siya.
Despite the delay, the agency assures that the distribution of the fuel vouchers will push through this month.
The technical details are still being worked out. Meron mga issues that we need to overcome, but pilit namin na maipatupad ito July.
Should the agency rolls out the program, 60-year-old driver Celso Quizon will be among its recipients. Quizon says this will help him cope with rising fuel prices and take home more income after spending 14 hours conveying passengers on the road. He says he only brings home 300 pesos income now because he spends 1,500 for fuel daily and also pays 800 pesos for jeepney boundary.
Paano kikita yung driver kung ganun mauwi namin? Di hanggang 200, 300 na lang. Paano yung pamilya ko? Paano kakain ng mga anak ko? Ganun na lang.
LTFRB says the distribution of the fuel vouchers to public utility jeepneys is covered by the imposition of the tax reform law. Joanano, UNTV News and Rescue, Quezon City.
Vice President Leni Robredo joins calls to suspend the implementation of the tax reform for acceleration and inclusion or TRAIN law. She also questions the need to amend the current Philippine Constitution. Ray Pelayo tells us why.
Vice President Leni Robredo supports the bid of some lawmakers to suspend the imposition of the tax reform for acceleration and inclusion or TRAIN law. In a media interview, she reiterates that the law should be reviewed following its negative effects, especially to poor Filipinos. Robredo claims the authorities did not anticipate the increase in market prices upon drafting its provisions as she hits the failure in distributing the subsidy for 10 million poor families, which is supposed to serve as the safety net of the TRAIN law.
Until now, July na, 2.2 million pa lang yung nabibigyan. Pero yung effects ng TRAIN, ramdam na mula nung pumasok yung 2018.
The Vice President also questions the need to amend the current Philippine Constitution and to shift into federal government. She insists there are more pressing issues than the government should focus on.
Bakit ang mas pinagtutuunan natin yung pansin? Yung charter change, na hindi naman siya yung sagot sa pagtaas ng presyo, hindi naman siya yung sagot sa kahirapan.
Robredo, meanwhile, confirms she will attend President Duterte's third State of the Nation address to know about his plans for his remaining years in office. Ray Pelayo, UNTV News and Rescue, Quezon City.
President Rodrigo Duterte is planning to visit Malaysia to meet with the newly elected Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad over security and counterinsurgency issues. According to presidential spokesperson Harry Roque, the two leaders will meet on July 16 after the fight between Senator Manny Pacquiao and Lucas Matisse in Kuala Lumpur on July 15. Roque says the president wanted to watch Pacquiao's boxing match and to meet Mohamad after the two leaders talked over the phone yesterday prior to his cabinet meeting in Malacanang.
Ang unang plano po ni Pangulo talagang it's going to be a private trip to watch Manny Pacquiao's fight. Pero nung nagkausap nga po sila ni Prime Minister Mahathir, nag-date na sila, no? Kumbaga, dahil 15 ang laban, 16 po ang magiging pag-uusap ni Presidente at ni Prime Minister Mahathir.
Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe cancels his overseas trip as rescuers race to find survivors after torrential rain unleashed floods and landslides. President Rodrigo Duterte, meanwhile, offers to send assistance to Japan as it reels from the disaster. Here's why from Ryuji Sasaki.
Japan begins assessing the damage from the country's worst flood disaster since 1983 as the death toll rose to over 100. Rescuers are still digging through mud and rubble racing to find survivors on Monday after torrential rain unleashed floods and landslides across a wide swathe of western Japan, forcing several million people to flee their homes. Officials say the overall economic impact was not clear, but that Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has cancelled an overseas trip to deal with the disaster.
There are still many people missing. We're increasing the number of self-defense forces to 73,000 members who are doing their utmost to rescue and assist locals.
Rain tapered off across the western region on Monday to reveal blue skies and a scorching sun that pushed temperatures well above 30 degrees Celsius, fueling fears of heat stroke in areas cut off from power or water, especially as people work to clear their homes and workplaces of rubble and mud. Some 11,200 households had no electricity, while hundreds of thousands had no water. Meanwhile, the Department of Foreign Affairs confirms that no Filipino was among the fatalities after the widespread flooding and landslides in Japan. Foreign Affairs Secretary Alan Peter Cayetano extended in a statement his sympathies to Japan and the families of the victims. President Rodrigo Duterte also offers to send help, including soldiers in the rescue and rehabilitation efforts in the affected areas.
Ang tulong po ay sa pagpapadala ng mga inhinero at saka mga doktor at ng gamot. Wala pa pong halaga at si Secretary Alan Peter Cayetano po ang magpapadala ng mensahe ito sa ambahador ng Japan.
Ryuji Sasaki, UNTV News and Rescue, Tokyo, Japan.
Health officials report that the first 8 boys rescued from the flooded cave in Thailand are all in good health. However, embracing and physically reuniting with their families would have to wait. Kat Dumaraos tells us why.
All 8 boys rescued so far are in good health overall, and the first 4 rescued boys are eating well. The boys who were brought out of the caves over the past 2 days have undergone x-rays and blood tests. 2 have been treated for lung inflammation. However, preliminary blood checks indicated all kids showed sign of infection.
The second group arrived yesterday are aged between 12 and 14 years old. One has a very low heartbeat rate and low body temperature. We provided them medicine and now they are back to normal. This morning, they were able to communicate well. They do not have fever.
Health officials say they were at first given instant food and energy gels, but are now eating easy-to-digest food. They also say some of the boys have now seen their parents, but only through glass. Further test results are expected in a few days, and if all signs of infection have cleared, families will be allowed to visit. However, they must don protective clothing and cannot go closer than 2 meters or 6 feet. The boys also have to wear sunglasses after being in a state of darkness for more than 2 weeks. The group would be kept under observation in hospital for a week. A crack team of foreign divers and Thai Navy SEALs guided the boys during a 9-hour operation through nearly 4 kilometers of sometimes submerged channels from where they have been trapped for more than a fortnight. The head of the operation, Narongsako Sutonakon, says rescuers had learned from experience and were 2 hours faster in bringing the second batch of survivors out as scattered monsoon rains continued to risk flooding the tunnels with water.
We expect that with the preparations and plan discussed today, we think that we will do even better for the next mission and we will succeed 100%.
Chiang Rai residents waiting at the same hospital housing the 8 boys rescued hope for the safe return of the rest of the group.
I am very worried about them. I pray for them all the time and hope they all come out safely.
Meanwhile, soccer's governing body FIFA has invited the boys to the World Cup final in Moscow on Sunday if they make it out in time. Kat Dumaraos, UNTV News and Rescue, Thailand.
Meanwhile, Royal Thai Navy SEAL Unit confirms that all 12 boys and their coach have been successfully rescued out from the depths of the Thamluang cave system. Outstanding Filipino films and artists are given recognition by the entertainment editors last night. Leslie Longbowen tells us why.
The many films shown last year, the Society of Philippine Entertainment Editors, or SPEED, named those that passed their critical eyes in the Eddy's Awards last night. Independent film Respeto won big, bagging 6 awards, namely Best Film, Best Supporting Actor, Best Supporting Actress, Best Musical Score, Best Sound Design, and Best Original Theme Song.
For us, to be nominated kasabay ng mga pelikula na gusto ko rin, diba? Sobra siyang karangalan, and I think bonus na lang yung nanalo kami for this category.
Birdshot also took home major awards including Best Director, Best Actress, and Best Cinematography.
I hope this encourages more young filmmakers to start, shooting and exploring, making their own films.
Lahat po ng sumusuporta sa akin, thank you so much po. Kung hindi po dahil sa inyo at sa pagtitiwala niyo po sa akin, hindi ko rin po makukuha itong award na to.
Meanwhile, Best Actor Award goes to Aga Mulak for 7 Sundays.
Well, unang-una syempre, congratulations. And they really deserve to win.
Please keep on doing what you're doing. Please continue to keep making the Filipino proud of your artistry.
Film Icon Tribute was also given to industry greats including Maricel Soriano, Charo Santos Concho, Nora Honor, Eddy Garcia, Susan Roses, and Gloria Romero. Other prominent names in the industry also received special awards. Meanwhile, Wishful 5 performed original theme songs of some of the nominated films.
Basta't kasama kita, wala nang hihiling, hahanapin pa.
The Eddy's 2018 is a production of Wish 1075. Leslie Longboan, UNTV News and Rescue, Parañaque City.
Up next on Y News. The Land Transportation, Franchising and Regulatory Board fines Grab Philippines for 10 million pesos over its 2 peso per minute charge. And the Philippine National Police advised local officials facing threats to hire private security details as they continue to solve the recent spate of political killings. Thank you for keeping me company in the first part of Y News. More reasons behind the stories with Angelo Castro III and William Thio after this quick break. I'm Rheena Villamor-Camara. Good evening.
Welcome back to Y News. We pick up from where Rheena Villamor-Camara left off. I'm Angelo Castro III, and here are the headlines. An armed man looking for Cebu Archbishop Palma dies in a police shootout. President Rodrigo Duterte's net satisfaction drops by 11 points according to the latest SWS survey. And the Bicameral Conference Committee approves some of the controversial provisions in the proposed Bangsamoro Basic Law. Good evening. Police operatives gunned down a man looking for Cebu Archbishop Jose Palma in what appeared to be a shootout inside the Archbishop's residence compound in Cebu City past 11 this morning. The mobile patrol group said they received a call regarding an armed man aboard a motorcycle who barged inside the Archbishop's palace. The man was identified as 41-year-old Jeffrey Cañedo and a resident of Barangay Labangon, Cebu City, based on his driver's license. Security guards assigned at the palace gate said policemen tried to stop the man, but the latter continued on inside the compound and fired at them, triggering a shootout. Palma was not in his residence when the incident happened. He flew to Manila last week to attend an assembly of the Catholic Bishops' Conference of the Philippines from July 7 to 9, 2018. The Philippine National Police is confident it is on the right track of solving the murder case of General Thio Mayor Ferdinand Bote. The PNP also advises local officials to hire private security details, especially those receiving threats. Let's find out why from Lea Ilagan.
Police investigators has traced the alleged location of the assailant on the killing of General Thio Mayor Ferdinand Bote. According to PNP Chief Police Director General Oscar Albayalde, they had been working on gathering evidence and are looking to arrest the perpetrators in the following days.
Itong linggo na to, itong pag-develop natin ng nasa amin na physical evidence.
And that includes arresting the person?
Yes, posible. And we have persons of interest already.
Albayalde adds the PNP Criminal Investigation and Detection Group has also established that the murder of Bote is not related to politics. However, CIDG Director Well Obusan refuses to divulge any details for now that may affect their ongoing investigations. Meanwhile, in the slay case of Tres Martires Vice Mayor Alex Lubigan, the PNP is still in the process of gathering information by questioning local executives such as City Mayor Menandres de Sagun. Police Region 4A Director Edward Carranza says they want to get all details relating to politics since his assassination happened the day after he announced his intention to run for a higher position.
As the incumbent mayor, since vice mayor niya ay namatay, it is inherent na makuha na namin sila ng konting mga informasyon regarding the incident.
The PNP also advises local officials to hire private security details, especially those who are receiving threats. Albayalde explains the PNP has a superior mandate, which is to enforce law and to protect the public's welfare.
Instead of police officers na pwede pa natin magamit sa ibang duties and functions, itong mga police natin, particularly on law enforcement, ay kumuha na lang sila ng security detail nila from accredited security agencies.
Meanwhile, the PNP is still examining the bullet shell they recovered from the grass area where the gunman allegedly perched on when he shot and killed Tanawan Mayor Antonio Halili last week. Leia Ilagan, UNTV, News and Rescue, Camp Crame.
President Rodrigo Duterte's net satisfaction rating fell by 11 points based on the latest survey of the Social Weather Stations, or SWS. The survey conducted from June 27 to 30, 2018, shows that 45% have said they are satisfied with Duterte's performance, which is lower than the 56% net satisfaction rating recorded in March of 2018. This implies that from the very good grade in March 2018, this turns to a new personal low classified by SWS as good. The net satisfaction of the president dropped in urban areas in Class D among men and women in all age groups except 18 to 24 years old. The bicameral conference panel agrees in some of the crucial provisions of the Bangsamoro Basic Law in the second day of its deliberations. Some lawmakers, meanwhile, are opposing the inclusion of North Cotabato and Lanao del Norte in the territories under the Bangsamoro region. Grace Casin tells us why.
Some of the controversial provisions of the proposed Bangsamoro Basic Law have been agreed upon by the Bicameral Conference Committee today. In a media briefing, Committee Chairman Senator Juan Miguel Subsidy bears that the panel was able to finish tackling over 80% of the total BBL versions. Among those they have agreed on is retaining the Philippine National Police and Armed Forces of the Philippines jurisdiction over the Bangsamoro Police and military forces. The Bangsamoro region will also not be allowed to procure its own firearms. The panel also agreed to remove the anti-political dynasty provision, and the elected officials will have 3 terms. Instead of Bangsamoro Basic Law, it will be called as Organic Law of the Bangsamoro in the Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao. The BICAM earlier approved the automatic 59 billion pesos black grant to be given to the Bangsamoro region. It is equivalent to the 5% revenue collection of the national government. 75-25 income sharing has been approved. Here, Bangsamoro government shall remit 25% of their income to the national government. Meanwhile, Senator Zubiri also says the lawmakers from North Cotabato and Lanao del Norte are opposing the inclusion of their districts in the Bangsamoro region.
Yung territory plebiscite, we decided to hold it to the last day. Medyo mainit at napakatindi ng discussions na nangyari doon.
Bangsamoro Transition Commission Chief Ghazali Jafar meanwhile expresses satisfaction over the BBL deliberations, even if a final version is yet to be released. He is also confident that the Moro people will accept this version.
They're happy because they are assured that the proposed Bangsamoro Basic Law is not watered down.
The BICAM is now studying the remaining contentious provisions of the BBL to make sure that it will pass legal scrutiny. The panel wants to avoid recurrence of what happened in the Memorandum of Agreement on Ancestral Domain during the time of President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo, which was declared unconstitutional. Members of the BICAM targets to come up with the final version of the BBL tomorrow night. Grace Casin, UNTV News and Rescue, Quezon City.
The Consultative Committee has revised the transitory provisions in the proposed draft of the federal constitution to bar the incumbent president from seeking re-election once the country shifts to a new charter. Maya Bermudez tells us why.
The plan to go for charter change has never failed to surprise even its own drafters. And now the president's request has been granted as they revise the transitory provisions in the proposed federal constitution, barring the chief executive to run and be re-elected and even head the Federal Transition Commission once the country shifts to a new charter.
We shall be electing, as per his suggestion, a transition president. But, basically, he will preside in the transition period, but he shall also be exercising all the powers of the president.
Despite this, the sitting transitory president will be barred from running in the 2022 general elections. Cabinet members will also be revamped during the transition period. Once the new constitution is ratified, the terms of all elected officials will also end. Meantime, lawmakers elected in the 2022 midterm elections will be placed in a holdover position, including Vice President Leni Robredo. But aside from the president, Robredo will also be required to vacate her seat to elect a transitory vice president, cutting short her supposed 6-year term.
Tandem, transitory president and transitory vice president. Kasi kung vice president ay presidente lang yung i-elect mo, kung na-disgrasya yung presidente, sinong magiging successor niya?
But both transition heads will only serve until 2022 once the country simulates federalism and elect the heads of state in tandem. But all of these are just suggestions because at the end of the day, the Congress will be the one to decide on whether to adopt these provisions. Maya Bermudez, UNTV News and Rescue, Manila.
A Senate committee assures it will work on the bill seeking to amend the Philippine Charter, but without a timetable. Meanwhile, opposition Senator Antonio Trillanes describes as a trap President Duterte's remark on wanting to have a transition president in 2019. Let's find out why from Nel Maribuhok's report.
The Senate Committee on Constitutional Amendments and Revision of Codes refuses to set a timeline in deliberating and finalizing the proposed amendments to the 1987 Constitution. The Senate is also yet to decide on whether to revise the Charter by Constituent Assembly or Constitutional Convention. This is despite the lower house's move to approve a resolution in January to amend the Constitution by CONAS.
So ayoko magbigay ng timetable o deadline. Of course, hindi rin natin ito sabihin na nating we will not block or delay unnecessarily itong magiging kilos ng ating komite.
Pangilinan's statement now casts doubt whether the recommendation of Consultative Committee Chairman, former Supreme Court Chief Justice Rheena on holding the plebiscite in May 2019, coinciding with the midterm elections, will be approved. Under the 1987 Constitution, changes to any of its provisions will only be valid after the ratification by a majority of votes cast in a plebiscite, which will be held not earlier than 60 days or later than 90 days after the approval of the amendments or revision by CONAS or CONCON. President Duterte is expected to formally endorse the draft federal charter to Congress on the day of his third State of the Nation address. Opposition Senator Antonio Trillanes IV, meanwhile, describes as a trap the statement of President Rodrigo Duterte of wanting to have a transition president if the federal constitution is ratified by next year. Trillanes claims Duterte only said this to push the senators in amending the constitution, while Senator Panfilo Lacson said in a statement that the proposed charter should not be about one person and that the decision to change the constitution must be based on the interest of future generations. Nel Maribuhok, UNTV News and Rescue, Ortigas Center.
The Land Transportation Franchising and Regulatory Board imposes a 10 million peso fine on ride-hailing company Grab Philippines for charging its passengers additional 2 pesos per minute on top of its approved fees. The agency also orders Grab PH to reimburse its patrons through rebates for future rides and will be availed of for only 20 days. The said order took effect yesterday, but a copy of the LTFRB's decision was only released this afternoon. Grab, however, can still appeal the order within 15 days, and if LTFRB denies the motion, they may raise it to the Department of Transportation. Grab Philippines, meanwhile, says it will reserve comment on the issue until they have studied the order. Customs Commissioner Isidro Lapeña insists he will not resign amid ouster plots. Lapeña also believes that the reshuffle of personnel hugely contributed to achieving the agency's monthly target revenue collection. Here's why from Aiko Miguel.
Customs Commissioner Isidro Lapeña maintains that he will stay in office as long as President Rodrigo Duterte says so. This is despite ouster plot from several employees of the Bureau of Customs, who he claims are opposing his policies in the agency. During today's episode of the program Get It Straight with Daniel Razon, he also bears the information he received about a 20 million peso sinking fund to discredit him.
I serve under the pressure of the President, Kuya Daniel. At hanggat andiyan yung tiwala ng ating Presidente sa atin, gagawin natin lahat ng ating makakaya para mapagsilbihan ang mamamayang Pilipino.
Lapeña also admits he was offered with pasalubong on his first day of taking over as Customs Commissioner. That experience, he said, prompted him to impose the no pasalubong, no tara system policy within the agency. In line with the administration's anti-corruption campaign, the customs chief imposed the one-strike policy among customs personnel, warning them against any involvement in corrupt practices such as smuggling. Lapeña estimates around 850 customs personnel were already dismissed or transferred to different offices under his administration due to illegal acts.
But I have the authority to move people. When
you can only move them, but that's the worst that you can do.
Yes.
But Commissioner Lapeña believes that the reshuffle of personnel hugely contributed to achieving the agency's monthly target revenue collection.
The one-strike policy is pag hindi na-hit ng target yung collector, then I change him or her.
Okay.
I change. At kasama dyan yung kanyang staff on the assessment. So from yung kanyang deputy collector for assessment, yung mga tao niya sa assessment, pinapalitan ko lahat yan. And it's working.
BOC records show that the revenue collection in June 2018 surpassed the agency's monthly target. BOC reached a total collection of 50.139 billion pesos, which is 2 billion pesos higher than the 47.80 billion pesos target revenue collection in June.
For the last 4 months, nag-shoot up yung revenue collection. It has mga all-time high in the history of the Bureau of Customs. For 2018, nadagdagan ng 150 billion pesos yung aming target. From 468, naging 598 billion. When I was asked that, I told them, yes, it is. I'm going to hit that target.
Aiko Miguel, UNTV News and Rescue, Quezon City.
UNTV officially commences today its first Rescue Olympics, which was attended by rescue groups from different parts of the country. Here's why from Monokson.
Different rescue groups in the country compete for strength, stamina, and agility as the first UNTV Rescue Olympics begins today. Rescue teams from Bataan, Bulacan, Cagayan, Isabela, Nueva Vizcaya, and Laguna take part in the preliminary competition held earlier at the Quezon City Memorial Circle. The competition aims to enhance the skills of rescuers in responding to accidents and calamities.
Skills, stamina, tsaka yung pinaka-chemist nung team. Kasi pag walang chemist, useless din yung pagsagot mo sa buhay.
Napasorpresa po kami sa mga obstacle kasi iba yung practice namin sa totoong obstacle pala. Pero nagawa naman namin ng maayos yung pinagawa nila.
According to Jerry Panghulan, BMPI UNTV Vice President for Administration and External Affairs, the participants are from the areas that can immediately respond if a strong earthquake hits Metro Manila.
Ginawa ito ng ating mga creative department na parang simulation kung ano yung ina-expect mong scenario in a given occurrence na halimbawa lindol, ito yung dadatnan mo. Pag-retrieve ng mga casualties.
Aside from gaining knowledge and skills, cash prizes also await the winning group that they may use to upgrade their rescue gears. The Office of the Civil Defense, meanwhile, applauds UNTV's initiative in improving the skills of Filipino rescuers.
Nakakatulong ito sa pag-advocate ng culture of preparedness at the lowest level possible. Pwede doon sa individual. Dahil yung approach natin is multi-stakeholder. So lahat ng magkakayanan na tumulong ay inanyaya natin na tumulong at tumugon.
Yusek Halad also appeals to local government in Metro Manila to sponsor rescue equipment for provincial responders because they are the ones who can respond should disaster hits Metro Manila.
So parang prepositioning of responders na rin yun, di ba? So nag-invest sila ng doon sa tutulong sa kanila.
The Rescue Olympics is part of the 3rd Rescue Summit that will start at 6 in the morning tomorrow at the Quezon City Memorial Circle. The said event is just one of the many public service initiatives of UNTV, spearheaded by Mr. Public Service, Kuya Daniel Razon. He also started the first and only news and rescue in the Philippines. Mon Hokson, UNTV News and Rescue, Quezon City.
Up next on Y News. Ethiopia and Eritrea declare end of war after a historic peace talks. And racers battle it out in pedal car Grand Prix in United Kingdom. And those are the reasons behind the stories in the second part of our newscast. Y News returns with William Thio. I'm Angelo Castro III. Good evening.
To complete the most significant news for this day, Y News continues. Here are the top stories. President Duterte approves the proposed cash-based national budget for the year 2019. Presidential spokesperson Secretary Harry Roque says the proposed budget is 3.757 trillion pesos, which is 10 billion pesos lower than last year's budget. Under cash-based appropriations, agencies will be forced to spend their respective budgets within the fiscal year, and that they will also no longer submit projects that are not yet implementation ready. There are no details yet if the proposal already includes the fund for the plebiscite on the shift to federal government next year.
Ang inaasahan nga po natin ay kasabayan ng 2019 elections, no? So kasama na po sa budget ng 2019 elections siguro po yun, kung maisasabay sa 2019 elections.
President Rodrigo Duterte will submit the proposed budget to Congress on July 23 to coincide with his 3rd State of the Nation address. Meanwhile, the Land Transportation Franchising and Regulatory Board is still finalizing the guidelines for the distribution of fuel vouchers that will benefit more than 170,000 legitimate public utility jeepney drivers and operators nationwide. According to LTFRB Chairman Martin Delgra, they are fast-tracking the launching of the fuel subsidy program this July that will provide 800 pesos monthly subsidy to jeepney drivers in the form of fuel vouchers. The agency earlier postponed the July 5 target date of distribution, asking for more time to address some issues, including the reliability of the database on franchise holders.
Para lang masiguro ng gasolinahan na yung binigyan ng card is identified yung sasakyan, yung sa card mismo nakalagay na rin yung plate number ng sasakyan. Kasama na rin yung pangalan ng operator, pati na rin po yung case number, if I'm not mistaken. Ibig sabihin, may prangkisa siya.
In other news, Vice President Leni Robredo supports the call of some lawmakers to suspend the implementation of the tax reform law. She says it should be reviewed following the increase in the prices of basic goods in the market, which severely affected poor Filipinos. Robredo also hits the failure in distributing the subsidy for 10 million poor families, which is supposed to serve as the safety net of the train law. The Vice President also questions the need to amend the current charter, insisting that the government should focus on more pressing issues.
Bakit ang mas pinagtutuunan natin yung pansin? Yung charter change, na hindi naman siya yung sagot sa pagtaas ng presyo, hindi naman siya yung sagot sa kahirapan.
Authorities are now looking into the possible motive of the man who was gunned down by the police after barging inside Cebu Archbishop's residence this morning. Following investigations, the armed man was identified as 41-year-old Jeffrey Cañedo and a resident of Barangay Labangon, Cebu City, based on his driver's license. He reportedly arrived at the compound on board his motorcycle looking for Cebu Archbishop Jose Palma. Police operatives said they were called on the scene when the man refused to be stopped and fired at the security personnel, leading to a shootout. Palma was not in his residence when the incident happened. Security will be tightened around the Archbishop's residence, while police are considering providing Palma with an escort. President Rodrigo Duterte's net satisfaction rating fell by 11 points based on the latest survey of the Social Weather Stations, or SWS. 45% have said they are satisfied with Duterte's performance, which is lower than the 56% net satisfaction rating recorded in March 2018. This implies that from the previous very good rating, this turns into a new personal low, classified by SWS as good. The survey was conducted from June 27 to 30, 2018. Duterte, meanwhile, shrugs off the drop in his latest ratings.
I do not care. Make it 15. Wala na ako dyan. It does not interest me at all. Basta ako, coast along na lang ako. I'm just traveling along the coast. And with a new suggestion, since I am not popular anymore, Congress might decide to get a popular one. You want a popular president? Fine. Good.
The Bicameral Conference Committee agrees in some of the controversial provisions of the Bangsamoro Basic Law in the second day of its deliberations. Committee Chairman Senator Juan Miguel Zubiri says the panel was able to finish tackling over 80% of the total BBL provisions, including the PNP and AFP's jurisdiction over the Bangsamoro Armed Forces. The Bangsamoro region will also not be allowed to procure its own firearms. The panel also agrees to remove the anti-political dynasty provision and that elected officials will have 3 terms. Instead of the Bangsamoro Basic Law, it will now be called as Organic Law of the Bangsamoro in the Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao. Senator Zubiri also says that lawmakers from North Cotabato and Lanao del Norte are opposing the inclusion of their districts in the Bangsamoro region.
Yung territory plebiscite, we decided to hold it till the last day. Medyo mainit at napakatindi ng discussions na nangyari doon.
The BICAM is now studying the remaining provisions of the BBL to make sure that it will pass any constitutional challenges. The BICAM targets to release the final version of the BBL tomorrow. The leaders of Ethiopia and Eritrea have signed a declaration saying that the state of war between the two countries is over. A peace deal ending the 1998 to 2000 border conflict has never been fully implemented, and there has been tension between the neighbors ever since. The countries have also agreed to re-establish trade and diplomatic ties. Family members divided by the dispute are now able to telephone each other for the first time since the war. The summit between Eritrea's President Isaias Afewerki and Ethiopia's Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed marked the first time the neighbors' heads of state had met for nearly 2 decades. Meanwhile, U.S. President Donald Trump has nominated Brett Kavanaugh for the Supreme Court, setting the stage for a bruising confirmation battle. In a primetime announcement at the White House, Trump praised his pick as a brilliant jurist. The nominee, a District of Columbia Appeals Court judge, is a former advisor to ex-President George W. Bush. The decision has far-reaching implications for America on everything from abortion to guns to immigration. This is Trump's second appointment to the highest court in the land, potentially allowing him to shape the U.S. for a generation after he leaves office. The July 10 court-ordered reunification deadline is fast approaching, but the U.S. government says only about half of the migrant children under age 5 can be reunited with their parents by then. Beverly Saison tells us why.
The U.S. government is struggling to reunite immigrant families that's separated at the border with Mexico, and only about half the children under age 5 will be back with their parents by a court-ordered deadline of Tuesday. U.S. Judge Dana Sabra in San Diego last month ordered the government to reunite the approximately 100 children under the age of 5 by Tuesday. But the American Civil Liberties Union says that after viewing a list of the 102 children under the age of 5 in the government's care, it appears likely that less than half will be reunited by the July 10 deadline.
So I think the bottom line is we are disappointed the government is not going to meet the deadline for all those children for whom they could have met the deadline, but we are pleased that the court is holding them to these deadlines.
However, during a hearing on Monday, Department of Justice lawyer Sarah Fabian said 54 of the children should be back with their parents by Tuesday. ACLU added that nonprofit groups were trying to find parents the government had failed to locate, who are mostly from El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras.
There are another 200 that it appears will not be reunited tomorrow, but we are meeting with the government to create a process for the fastest reunifications possible.
The organization and government agreed the locations of the releases would not be disclosed, and the government agreed to work with immigration advocates to ensure the parents had money for a hotel and other necessities. Meanwhile, a U.S. federal judge on Monday rejected the Trump administration's request to allow long-term detention of illegal immigrant children. In a ruling in federal court in California, Judge Dolly Gee turned down a U.S. Justice Department motion to suspend a requirement of the Flores settlement to allow the government to keep underage migrants in detention alongside their parents. Beverly Saison, UNTV News and Rescue, USA.
While Formula One drivers battle it out in the British Grand Prix in Silverstone, another English town racers took their marks for a slightly different type of a tournament. Here's why from Leslie Longbowen.
33 teams comprised of up to 4 drivers took part in the 2-hour race of endurance in the historic town of Ringwood in Hampshire. The mixed teams are also allowed 2 additional members to provide support in the pits and to push the cars out after pit stops. According to estimates, more than 2,000 people lined the streets around the 1.4-kilometer circuit to cheer on their favorite teams and to enjoy the spectacle.
You know, we're here to take part and have a bit of fun, but at the same time, we do want to, you know, place somewhere quite respectful out of the cars that are in the race.
Temperatures of over 30 degrees Celsius presented an additional challenge to this year's race. A pedal car is a human-powered vehicle with 4 wheels. Many of the cars were designed and built by the teams themselves, some made of agricultural scraps, while others followed a theme or were more refined. The team taking the #1 spot this year was Apollo Racing #2, comprised of 17-year-old Ben Taylor and his godfather Jess Featherstone, 43. The British Pedal Car Grand Prix is held every 2 years, leaving plenty of time for wannabe racers to start building and testing their vehicles now. Leslie Longbowen, UNTV News and Rescue.
And those are the reasons behind the news July 10, 2018. On behalf of Rheena, Villamor-Camara, and Angelo Castro III, I am William Thio. Because we need to know, we will always ask why. Good evening.